Welcome back, MTG Joe here, and we are going to be looking at a meta breakdown, the first kind of full data set that we've gotten from Untapped GG, which is a companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client. So what we do with these videos is we look at kind of a weekly analysis in terms of what the current best decks on the MTG Arena ladder are for various formats. This particular video will be focused on Standard. So we'll look at both best of 1 and best of 3, look at some weekend tournaments as well to kind of see what's been popular around the week that is. This is with all the new cards from Kamigawa. So if you are interested in leveraging Untapped, is free to use companion tool, tracks your win rates, adds data to kind of the pool, suggests decks you can build, has a lot of in-game functionality as well that you can leverage. It's free to use. The link is in the video description, so if you want to click on that, it does help support the channel as well. So jumping into it, if we look, I'm actually going to just switch the filters for a sec. Keep it 200 games. So we have Platinum to Mythic rank from February 13th to the 20th. 210,000 games of Magic played. So week 1, you're still going to see a bit of noise. Just people are still acquiring cards. People just play the same decks that they have. So I'm going to kind of skip over kind of decks that we've already seen and highlight some of the new decks that are coming out. These decks are still viable if you want to play them. But we've kind of covered a lot of these week to week. One thing, if you are looking for deck lists, I'll post some of them in the video description that are easily importable as well. So jumping into it with Standard. So like I said, 210,000. The top performing decks, we have 2 variations of Mono White Aggro. Notably with Mono White, we've seen the move off of Snowlands because you don't get Faceless Haven. This version is actually playing Snowlands, which just kind of puts you as a disadvantage because a lot of the decks are playing Redain main. So that kind of makes it so your lands come into play tap. There's no benefit of the snow, unlike Mono Green, which still plays Blizzard Brawl. Most of them are playing like Eiganjo, the new channel land, which has been very good. I actually got Mythic this month playing Mono White Aggro, a different version that I'll show you with the Wandering Emperor and then a couple of the new lands. I went 17 and 5 with that through Diamond pretty easily. One of my buddies is up to top 300 Mythic with the list now. So we're having some success there. So pretty much your stock mono white lists here. So we're just going to kind of skim over them. And then we're kind of looking at a couple versions of Selesnya Enchantments. So there's a few builds of these enchantment decks. They're base green white. Some of them are going Naya for red mana for Showdown of the Skalds. Some of them are playing like a rune package with Runeforge Champion. So we'll kind of look at the core. And this one's a slightly more aggressive version. And then there's a Hallowed Haunting version. So the more aggressive version uses Generous Visitor, a 1-drop that gets to distribute counters based on the number of enchantments you cast. Whenever you cast an enchantment, including some of the enchantment creatures, it would trigger. So it's kind of a snowbally effect and lets you scale up your creatures. The decks pretty much always play Spirited Companion, 2 mana 1/1 that cycles, and then is an enchantment itself. This version here, the more aggressive versions, will play Kami of Transience. So this is a 2 mana 2/2 Trampler. Whenever you cast an enchantment, itself gets +1/1 counter. And then if it's in your graveyard and an enchantment went to your graveyard that turn, you get to return it to your hand. So it's kind of built-in recursion to the card. Cool thing with Untapped, you can see I'm missing 2 wild cards here. So if I want to craft this deck, it'll say I need 2 rare wild cards, where if we look at something like this, I have all the cards. Weaver of Harmony is a lord for your enchantment creatures, also lets you copy triggered abilities. So if you have something like a Saga, activating one of those, Wedding Announcement, if you have Circle of Confinement, for example, it comes into play, the trigger goes on the stack, you can copy that trigger and then exile 2 things. So kind of a cool interaction there. And then Jukai Naturalist is probably the best play you can have on turn 2 in these decks a lot of times. It just lets you have really explosive turns by reducing the cost of a lot of your spells. The lifelink's also relevant if you can make it quite large, just to kind of race with other creature decks. This version's also opting for 4 Snakeskin Veils as a protection spell, as well as some copies of Sejiri Shelter. So really kind of protect the Queen style strategy. If we look at the enchantments itself, Circle of Confinement as removal, Michiko's Reign of Truth, so this is a buff for the first 2 chapters based on artifacts and enchantments. Real Metal Cyst vibes, and then itself the creature becomes, on the 3rd chapter, power and toughness equal to your enchantments and artifacts. You have Rune of Might, which gives trample and cycles. Sparring Regiment's an interesting inclusion here, and I do like it. It lets you kind of play offense-defense, scales up any of your creatures, and gives you access to a learn board, which is nice. And then you have Wedding Announcements, a couple copies. This land has been very, very, very good. I would probably play 2, to be honest. But it looks like they're heavier. I'd probably play 2. And then honestly, even Boseiju, like if enchantments are going around so much, Boseiju plays out pretty well. I think you're not like super heavy at need on terms of basics, and you're not playing snow synergies or anything like that. I'd probably play 2. Or even just like slot in another creature land or something like that. You do have the Lairs. The lesson board you have listed out here. Lesson boards are really kind of build your own adventure. So if we compare that to this version here, so you still have your Spirited Champion, Weaver Harmony, Jukai. You're playing Catilda on this. While it itself is not an enchantment, it scales up power and toughness equal to to enchantments and spirits. The lifelink's been like super relevant in games that I've played with this card. And then with this version here, you're playing up to Hallowed Haunting. So this one's a little bit more of a mid-rangey shell, like token. So you get spirits whenever you cast enchantments that also fuel the Catilda. This version here, you have like Borrowed Time, Michiko, but this one also is playing Restoration of Eiganjo. So this one here will search for lands, kind of get free discard value, and then become a pretty solid creature, all things considered. And then it's the 4 of Wedding Announcement. I found this version here. I've played a couple versions, so if you want to see like a rune-based version, if you want to see kind of this Hallowed Haunting version, I have a couple videos up in the last week on the channel, so if you want to see those in action. We played a couple different shells just to see. I don't think there's a definitive one. When this gets rolling, it's crazy, but it's a little slow to get going in some matchups. I found with this version, either you're absolutely destroying your opponent or you're getting killed really quick. The kind of more aggro version tends to have a bit more consistency, I would say, and less kind of swings. We see this Naya humans deck, mono white humans with Minsk, Halana, and Sigarda. This list has been around for a bit. Mono green, while not highlighted here, we'll highlight it in the best of 3 section. They're playing the 5 mana sorcery that gives you 2 4/5 tokens with a counter of your choice. A lot of the mono green lists are moving towards that. Orzhov Control, there's a couple updates we'll highlight in the best of 3 version, but a lot of them are moving to more low to the ground kind of versions off of the Blood on the Snow. We see Azorius Control, kind of a flash control deck. We're seeing 4 of Wandering Emperors in this list. This card's been very, very good. Any kind of a deck, mid-range aggro control. The minus lets you kind of ambush Viper. It's the new Settle the Wreckage. Creates a token at instant speed, and then even just in combat, like with the mono white list, you could attack in and give a creature first strike or an extra power to kind of work nicely in combat. This version is also playing a Cemetery Protector, so it's kind of a blue-white flash list. The one thing I've really liked in the Azorius deck, where this version's a little bit heavier on permanent, but Devastating Mastery, with all the types of like enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers, stuff like that, is pretty good, as well as Farewell, just from an exile style effect, has been really good. But this list here should also be playing Eiganjo and the blue land as well. I don't know, Ottawa, or something like that. I don't know, the names I'm still getting used to. They should be playing this. Eiganjo, yeah. We're seeing an Esper Planeswalker list. This is basically, looks like the individual typed Planeswalker into the Arena deck builder, and then clicked one of each. Kaido's Shizuki, which is a lot of the black-white mid-range decks are splashing to the Esper just for this card as a card advantage engine. We see kind of all the hits, every Planeswalker. We see some copies of Farewell in here. March of the Wretched for some life gain and damage. Even the white X discard kind of effect is nice kind of a removal spell. So this is one version of the Orzhov tokens list. We're seeing Wandering Emperor in here. A lot of the lists are going up higher on Rite of Oblivion. These kind of more mid-rangey shells are also playing Restoration of Eiganjo, just as a way to kind of accrue card advantage. There's a lot of cheap stuff you could throw away and get back. At the very worst case, you throw away the land you get and it comes into play, so it's pseudo-ramp. So some value there. Another version of the Enchantments deck. This Landfall deck's nothing new. That's the old deck. We see mono black control, so it's a Blood on the Snow deck. We're seeing Junji, the Midnight Sky, so when it dies, each opponent discards 2 and loses 2, or you can reanimate a non-dragon. These dragons are powerful. I just find there's so much exile-based removal in the format that it kind of removes like the viability of it. Like even if we look at the inclusion of this new removal spell, Soul Transfer, this card here, it's an exile target creature or planeswalker, so you kind of lose a value. This Invoke Despair card's been really good. I've been playing around with a more controlling mono black deck, and just Invoke Despair on your opponents. Like the fact that they can force to sack planeswalkers, get you card advantage, stuff like that. I've been really impressed with this card. I don't know what this does. Debt to the Kami. Target opponent exiles a creature they control. Target opponent exiles an enchantment they control. So just a flexible card there. Kind of coming down. This Abzan version, you get basically Binding and you get the Gloom Shrieker kind of coming in here. I've largely found Ranger class pretty bad in these shells. You have stuff like Commune and Spirit for card advantage. I think just going either straight green-white or Naya is ultimately a better configuration. We have Boros artifacts. So you have like Hotshot Mechanic, Rabbit Battery. I think this was Croaky's list. So just a bunch of cheap artifacts that kind of synergize together. They get bigger, kind of patchwork automation. You have Angel Fire Ignition, Maul the Skyclave to kind of piece together. So kind of a cool new aggro-y deck. We see Dimir Ninjas. I've yet to see a Ninjas deck on the ladder. Just a bunch of cheap evasive creatures and you're kind of ninjutsuing out stuff. I'd be interested to see how this plays out in practice. I've yet to see it on the ladder, so I can't really comment on it. I would imagine some games you could tempo out, but the fact that you're never really consistently adding to your board might be an issue when you're trying to like attack and block against something like mono white. The Goblins deck's been around. This Hinata deck is another deck that's been largely popular, and we'll see instances of it in best of 3. Basically, so with Hinata out and a Magma Opus, you could potentially cast Magma Opus for 2 mana. Because there's 4 damage to be allocated, there's 4 targets there, plus 2 lands is 6, which gives you a cost reduction of 6. So it's kind of a Jeskai. It's basically an Izzet splash white for Hinata in a Valor stance. Control deck that's looking to cheat out Magma Opus, similar to like the Gear Hulk decks in Historic. So it's quite popular, especially in best of 3. In best of 1, they don't really have a lot of like sweeper style effects, so mono white can easily get under them. If we're looking at the actual interaction, other than some Abrades and some Prismaris, like they don't have too much. So they're trying to catch you with like Jwari, or get down an early Magma Opus, or just kind of overwhelm you with the top end. We see mono red here, so Rabbit Battery, Rabbit to give you haste. We see like the Ogre Helm. These names will be the end of me. Ogre Head Helm to kind of refill your hand, similar to Bomat Courier. And then we see some copies of Atushi. I played a similar version of mono red, a little bit more modified, like modify focused, like the actual like mechanic with the Kami, the 4 mana 3/3 haste that puts counters. A lot of the shells look to be moving towards mono red modify. Ultimately, I find like it's been pretty tough. There's so many incidental tokens. It's hard to kind of push through with some of the damage and lifelink. So like yeah, like this version here. So you have like Fireblade Charger, Rabbit Battery, the Bloodthirsty, Upriser Renegade into Thundering Raiju. And then you have like Dueling Rapier, you have the Kumano to kind of beef it up. So kind of some options there. So now we're kind of into the dumpster tier of things. The mono white deck that I've played, 17-5. I went 17-5 in only an hour and 40 minutes. So this deck plays really quick if you just want to rank up quick. So really it's your mono white deck. So my removals, 2 Portable Holes, 2 Fateful Absence, 4 Brutal Cathars. The Brutal Cathars over Skyclave Apparition just for tokens. It doesn't leave a body behind, where Skyclave won't be able to hit anything from like Wedding Announcement, stuff like that. Also in control matchups, this can at least force them to interact. Otherwise it flips and becomes a more reasonable attacker, where Skyclave Apparition into the control matchups is always going to be a 2 power. This can also hit like Goldspan Dragon, a Hullbreaker in a pinch, where the other Skyclave has the limitation of being 4. And then we're playing 3 of Wandering Emperor. Just really impressed with this card. And then Eiganjo and Cave of the Frost Dragon. So overall, like, you beat up on pretty much any of the unrefined lists, and you could be positive most of the games. Like, this was a devastating Mastery Doomskar for Sunset Revelry deck, which they just swept me like 5 times. So that usually can get out. This was a Cinderclasm Lair loss, where they just kept flashing back all their removal. So unless the opponent's like heavy removal, I had pretty positive win rates across the board. And even with this, I went like 4-2 into 13-3. So it started a little slow, but the deck, once you kind of get the lines, picks up pretty well. So that's best of 1. For best of 3, the ladder from Untapped, they just don't have enough sample size to really give informative, but we had a couple big tournaments this weekend, so good population here. So for those of you who aren't familiar, MTG Melee is kind of the online tournament host. So there's a lot of tournaments. Like this one is hosted by Crokies that had 585 participants, and I believe the prize was a invite to the Pro Tour, whatever it is called now, Set Championship. And qualifier weekends, also like 2K cash, which is nice. So big tournament here. So this is still in flight, I believe. They're in like the top 4 when I'm recording this. It's a 2-day tournament. So if we look at the meta breakdown, Jeskai Control, the Hinata decks, was the most represented deck in the tournament at 57, so about 10% of the field. Overall posting a 54% win rate. The Izzet Control decks, kind of Goldspan Lair, second most represented deck, but only 40% win rate. So it's a little tough to see. So you have Orzhov Control, which I think is signified by Blood on the Snow. Then you have Orzhov Midrange, and there's also Orzhov Tempo. So it's kind of misconstrued. You also have Orzhov Planeswalkers in terms of like what representation is Orzhov, but I think overall Orzhov had a really good showing in the various forms. Orzhov Control 57%, Orzhov Midrange 57%, Orzhov Planeswalkers 60%, Orzhov Tempo 64%. So a lot of high win rates for the Orzhov decks. Mono White's probably not as good in best of 3. Just given the amount of sweepers, a lot more interaction post board. Mono White wins because it puts a lot of pressure early and, you know, punishes your opponent for having stuff like Disdainful Stroke in the deck. Mono Green Aggro, we'll take a look at some lists. Didn't have the greatest showing, same with Azorius Control. We see the Naya Ruins deck, which is, with the Naya version in best of 3, they play up to Showdown of the Skalds, so more card advantage, more kind of grind out value. We see Mono Red Aggro, sub 50%, Esper Tempo, 51%, but we have a couple top performers there. Esper Control, 38%. So we see kind of a mix here. Anything else stick out? Orzhov Tempo, Abzan Midrange, which is, I think, the vehicle version. Mono Black Control. Now we're just getting into small sample size where population's not the best, but this is a pretty good sample just based on like 500 folks playing. So we look at some of the top decks. Zan Saeed is playing. It's basically black-white, like your Wedding Announcement, Meat Hook deck, Deadly Dispute, but you also have 3 Kaido Suzukis, no Lulth in this particular deck. You have 4 Malevolent Hermits as kind of a counter, so it's a lot more tempo focused. You have Legion Angel, Spirited Companion to cycle, and just kind of get the value there. So this deck is currently 11-0. He is playing against Elliot Dragon right now. They were like game 1. I've been watching like Elliot's stream most of the morning. Game 1 versus him versus Zion. Elliot won game 1, and he had under 10 minutes on the clock. Zan had like 11, so the game 1 took like 20 minutes off each player's clock. So this is Esper Planeswalkers, Wandering Emperor, Tef, Kaido, Nico, Soren, Lulth, Kotos, which is actually some interesting tech. Basically what I see him do is like you take your opponent's duress, their go blank, stuff like that, take out kind of their sideboard cards or their hate cards, and then you use them against your opponent. So kind of a cool inclusion there. 4/4 body for 5 on its own, not great, but kind of some utility out of that. This version here, 3 Doomskar, 4 Farewell. No Meat Hook in this particular one, but we have 2 March of the Wretched Sorrow, the black deal damage, and then the white exile, artifact, enchantment, or creature. So kind of interesting there. You have like Edgar on the side. This Life of Toshiro Umezawa. This was being brought in from what I could see against like the tokens decks for the -1/1. So some interesting utility out of the sagas. We see Jeskai combo, like mentioned. It's the this version here is actually not the Hinata. So Goldspan Lair, and it looks like a Alchemist Gambit turns deck that's using like Kazal's Fury, Show of Confidence. So it's a cool kind of cast multiple spells, make it really big, and then fling. So it's like the old fling combo. This one's actually pretty sweet. You have like Galvanic Iteration to copy spells. Every time you target your Goldspan Dragon, you get a treasure. So kind of a cool inclusion there. Lair lets you cast all those things again. Now we're moving into the Orzhov portion. So Orzhov Control. This is pretty stock. We see Wandering Emperor in here. And then the Restoration of Eiganjo. So this is some Blood on the Snow. No Blood on the Snow. So they're off the Bloods on the Snow. But are they playing Snowlands? Probably not. It's probably just default. We see Ao, the White Dragon, that kind of tutors when it dies. Some Valkyries in this. So kind of a more mid-rangey version. Very similar. This one's got Graveyard Trespassers. So there's a lot of different flavors of Orzhov in this tournament. We see the Hinata combo as well. Some of them are on Goldspan and Hinata. Some of them are just on Hinata. So it's usually kind of the break there. Orzhov Control again. This one's a little bit heavier. We got like Biting Bomb Ninja, Henrika. So kind of a mix of cards in there. Golgari Midrange. I'm not going to like feature all of them. I'll put the link. You can download any of these deck lists that interest you, kind of search and stuff like that. This one's kind of a rock style deck. So it's like an Eska's Chariot Ren deck. You have Dreadfast Demon, Tainted Adversary, so making tokens to try to copy them, which is kind of cool. Naya Runes, your Runeforge Champion, like Restoration of Eiganjo, Showdown of the Scald, so kind of value there. The Restoration is interesting with only 2 planes, but it's just a good card on its own. Showdown to refill your hand, so kind of a cool... you see Waking the Troll, so that's just sweet to begin with anyways. Jeskai Control. Yeah, Hinata, Goldspan, Smoldering Egg. Selesnya Humans. It's kind of like green-white mid-range tokens ramp style deck. Not sure why they labeled it Humans. Rakdos Sacrifice. This is a Ani Cult Anvil, so cool to see this deck place well. I've liked this type of strategy. Naya Runes, Esper Walkers, Gruul Werewolves actually put up a decent result in Standard. It's It's much better in Alchemy. This is the Is It Midrange. You might run into this, some number of this. It's basically just like a stock recent set, Kamigawa, just they added the Otawara in the red channel line. So that's pretty much it from this tournament. You can go through, I just want to feature some of the top decks. And then this is Seth Manfield. It's a smaller tournament. This one had 43 players. So this is one he runs in his Discord. He plays himself. So we had Jukai Control win this one. Goldspan Hinata deck, so very kind of similar. We have Orzhov Control. Really just kind of your mid-range shell. Is it Control? This is likely the Hullbreaker Goldspan deck. Did he add any new cards? Burn Down the House is pretty solid just with all the Planeswalker decks going around. For a while there weren't a lot of Planeswalkers being played, but there's a lot of good Planeswalkers now. So going back to Burn Down the House seems really good. Azorius Tempo, kind of the blue-white flashy style deck. We see Naya Aggro, which is likely... Oh, this is the Halana and Elena mono-white Naya kind of deck. Azorius Control. So again, there's a lot of decks here. You can take a look. I'm not going to go through all of them. Okay, wait, I saw Mardu Planeswalkers. I saw Mardu Planeswalkers. It went 1-4, and it is a collection of cards that, again, they added one-ofs, but I like Mardu. Did they play the Saga? I'm a sucker for that, like Mythic Mardu Saga. But some options there. If we look at the most played decks in this tournament, Azorius Control had a better showing here. Jukai Control 70%. Is It didn't do too hot just from classification, but this is a smaller tournament, so I wouldn't really weigh. Like play draw has more of an impact in this type of format, but gives you an idea. I think the Kamigawa qualifier here that Crokies ran, 585 folks, 12-13 game. Let me just see if that last round finished. See if we can get updated. Yeah, so Elliot Betzan. So 11-1. If we look at the, they're cutting to top 8 now. So the metagame breakdown will be out. So we caught it just in time, but really interested here. Kind of cut to top 8. I think this is double elimination. So we see the 3 folks left: Jukai Combo, Esper Walkers, and Esper Tempo. So that's pretty much it. This one's a little bit more detailed just because it's the first time. I'm going to see if I can get Historic and Alchemy out, if there is enough sample size. If not, standard it is. Anyways, I appreciate everyone watching. If you can, drop a like and comment on the video. It's free and helps out greatly. If you haven't done so already, do consider subscribing. We put out these meta videos once a week for each format based on data, tournaments, stuff like that. And then we also put up a bunch of gameplay if you want to see any of these decks in action. We try to do informative gameplay, kind of teach you the ropes. Kind of demo the decks, lines of plays, stuff like that, and try to give honest opinions on the deck, whether win or lose. Like right now I'm like top 1200 Mythic, but sometimes the deck just sucks, sometimes the deck is awesome. We try to highlight both to help folks out. Anyways, thanks for watching, have a great one, and stay safe out there.